Okay, guys. I hope you guys are missing me because I've been super busy. I wanted to bring you a couple of creepy stories this evening. I'm definitely going to get one down. I don't know if I'll get the other one, but if not, I'll try and do it tomorrow. I am going to tell you guys a true creepy story, okay? And we'll try to do one creepy story until Halloween. This is about a man named Carl Tanzler, okay? Or sometimes called Count Carl von Cosel. He was a German-born radiology technologist at the Marine Hospital Service in Key West, Florida. He developed an obsession for a young Cuban girl named Elena Milagro de Hoyos. She was a tuberculosis patient in the hospital. That carried on after the disease had caused her death. In 1933, almost 2 years after her death, Tanzler removed Hoyos' body from its tomb, which he paid for, and he was the only one with the key. I don't know why her family didn't think that was strange, but it's crazy. So he removes her body from the tomb 2 years later, okay, and lived with the corpse in his home for 7 years until it was discovered by De La Hoya's family in 1940, okay? He was born February 8th, 1877, okay? And he did have a wife named Doris, and he had two girls, Aisha and Clarissa, which he left in order to be with his corpse bride. Tanzler went by the names. He was listed as George Carl Tanzler on his German marriage certificate. He was listed as Carl Tanzler von Cosel on his United States citizenship papers, and he was listed as Carl Tanzler on his Florida death certificate. Some of his hospital records were signed Count Carl Tanzler von Cosel. Okay? Now, here's some backgrounds on him. He was born Carl Tanzler, okay, like I said, February 8th, 1877 in Dresden, Germany. Around 1920, he married Doris Anna Schaefer. Together, they had two children, which I told you about. He grew up in Germany. The following editorial note accompanying his autobiographical account, The Trial Bay Organ. A product of wit and integrity by Carl von Cosel, gives detail about his stay in Australia before and during World War I and his return to Germany after the war. Many years ago, Carl von Cosel traveled from India to Australia with the intentions of proceeding to the South Sea Islands. He paused in Australia to collect equipment and suitable boats and to become acquainted with prevailing weathers and sea conditions. However, he became interested in engineering and electrical work there, bought boats and property, and Oregon, an island in the Pacific, also that he was still in Australia at the end of the 10 years. He had just begun to build a trans-ocean flyer when the war broke out and the British military authorities placed him in a concentration camp for safekeeping, along with many officers, India and China, who were prisoners of war. Later, he was removed to Trial Bay to a castle-like prison on the cliffs, and there the work in this narrative was accomplished. At the end of the war, no prisoner was permitted to return to his former residence, but all were shipped to the prisoners' exchange in Holland. When Carl von Cosel was released, he set out to find his mother, whom he had not heard from since the beginning of the war. Finding her safe, he remained with her for 3 years, witnessing the chaos that followed in the wake of the war. Finally, she suggested her son return to his sister in the United States. Tanzler's account of Trial Bay, his secret building of a sailing boat, is confirmed by those who mention that he planned to escape in the sailboat, and provides other information about intermediate Germans in Australia during World War I. He was immigrated to the United States in 1926, sailing from Rotterdam to Havana, Cuba. And then from Cuba, he settled in Zephyrilus, Florida, to where his sister had already emigrated, and was later joined by his wife and 2 daughters, leaving his family behind in Zephyrilus. In 1927, he took a job as a radiology technician at the U.S. Marine Hospital in Key West, Florida, under the name Carl von Cosel. During his childhood in Germany and later while traveling briefly in Genoa, Italy, Tanzler claimed to have been visited by visions of a dead ancestor, Countess Anna Constanta von Cosel, who revealed the face of his true love, a dark and exotic, dark-haired woman. Okay? Now, Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, on April 22nd, 1930, while working at the hospital, he met her, a local Cuban-American woman who had been brought to the hospital by her mother for examination. Tanzler immediately recognized her as the beautiful dark-haired woman that had been revealed to him in his earlier visions. Excuse me. By all accounts, Hoyos was viewed as a local beauty in Key West. Elena was the daughter of a local cigar maker, Francisco Pancho Hoyos, and Aurora Milagro. She had 2 sisters, Florinda Nana Milagro Hoyos, who married Mario Medina and also succumbed to tuberculosis, and Cecilia Milagro Hoyos Medina. Nana's husband was electrocuted trying to rescue a crow worker who hit a power line with his crane at a construction site. Kind of creepy how this family was like just destined for horrible things. February 18th, Hoyos married Luis Misa, the son of Caridad and Isaac Misa. Luis left Hoyos shortly after Hoyos miscarried the couple's child and moved to Miami. Hoyos was legally married to Misa at the time of her death. Hoyos was eventually diagnosed with tuberculosis, a typically fatal disease at the time that eventually claimed the lives of almost all and her immediate family. Tanzler, with his self-professed medical knowledge, attempted to treat and cure Hoyos with a variety of medicines, and as well as x-rays and electrical equipment that would be brought to her home. Tanzler showered her with gifts of jewelry and clothing and allegedly professed his love to her, but no evidence from anywhere has surfaced to show that any of his affections were reciprocated by her. Despite Tanzler's best efforts, Hoyos died of tuberculosis at her parents' home in Key West, October 25th, 1931. Tanzler paid for her funeral, and with the permission of her family, he commissioned the construction of an above-ground mausoleum in Key West Cemetery, which he visited almost every night. One evening in April 1933, Tanzler crept through the cemetery where Hoyos was buried and removed her body from the mausoleum, carting it through the cemetery after dark on a toy wagon and transporting it to his home. He repeatedly said that Hoya's spirit would come to him when he would sit by her grave and serenade her corpse with her favorite Spanish song. He also said that she would often tell him to take her from her grave. Tanzler attached the corpse's bones together with wire and coat hangers and fitted the face with glass eyes. As the skin of the corpse decomposed, Tanzler replaced it with silk cloth soaked in wax and plaster of Paris. As the hair fell out of the decomposing scalp, Tanzler fashioned a wig from Hoyos' hair that had been collected by her mother and given to Tanzler not long after her burial. Tanzler filled the corpse's abdominal and chest cavities with rags to keep the original form, dressed Hoyos' remains in stockings, jewelry, and gloves, and kept the body in his bed. Tanzler also used copious amounts of perfume, disinfectants, and preserving agents to mask the odor and to forestall the effects of the corpse decomposition. In October 1940, Hoyos' sister Florinda heard rumors of Tanzler sleeping with a disinterred body of her sister and confronted him at his home, where Hoyos' body was eventually discovered. Florinda notified the authorities and Tanzler was arrested and detained. He was psychiatrically examined and found mentally competent to stand trial. Miraculously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization, after a preliminary hearing at the Monroe County Courthouse in Key West, he was held to answer on the charge, but the case was eventually dropped and he was released as the statute of limitations for the crime had expired. Shortly after the corpse's discovery by the authorities, Hoyos' body was examined by physicians and pathologists and put on public display at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home, where it was viewed by as many as 6,800 people. Hoyos' body was eventually returned to Key West Cemetery, where the remains were buried in an unmarked grave in a secret location to prevent further tampering. True. The facts underlying the case and the preliminary hearing drew much interest from the media at the time, most notably from the Key West Citizen and Miami Herald, and creating a sensation among the public, both regional and nationwide. The public mood was generally sympathetic to him, whom many viewed as an eccentric romantic. Though not reported, contemporaneously research, most notably by Harrison and Swishgood, has revealed evidence of Tanzler's necrophilia with Hoyos' corpse. Two physicians, Dr. Deepu and Dr. Faulkner, who attended the 1940 autopsy of Hoyos' remains, recalled 1972 that a paper tube had been inserted in the vagina area of the corpse that allowed intercourse. Interesting. Others contend that since there's no evidence of necrophilia was present at the 1940 preliminary hearing, and because the physician's proof surfaced in 1972, over 30 years after the case had been dismissed, the necrophilia allegation is questionable. But I can tell you that it probably did happen. While no existing contemporary photographs of the autopsy or photographs taken at the public display show, the necrophilia claim was repeated by the HBO autopsy program in 1999. Now, that's when I first learned of this story, and I've been fascinated with it since then. So let me see what this says. If this says anything. Okay. In 1944, Tanzler moved to Pasco County, Florida, close to where he wrote an autobiography that appeared in pulp publications Fantastic Adventures. His home was near his wife, Doris, who apparently helped to support Tanzler in his later years. Tanzler received United States citizenship in 1950. Separated from his obsession, Tanzler used a death mask to create a life-size effigy of Hoyos and lived with it until his death on July 3rd, 1952. His body was discovered on the floor of his home 3 weeks after his death. He died under the name Carl Tanzler. It has been recounted that Tanzler was found in the arms of Hoyos' effigy upon discovering of his corpse, but his obituary reported that he died on the floor behind one of his organs. The obituary recounted a metal cylinder on a shelf above a table. In it, wrapped in silken cloth and a robe, was a waxen image. It has been written that Tanzler had the body switched, or that Hoyos' remains were secretly returned to him, and that he had died with the real body of her. Interesting. So basically, this is really, not something you hear about every day, but definitely a very interesting story. I'm going to include pictures, of course, and I'm curious to see, what you guys think about this story. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think, and